in the entire series. It'll go throughout the entire year. After Asa and Chris, Strike That, Reverse It, are done, I'm going to go over like what's our next lectures, which are some really cool ones coming up. But we have Chris Pattison and Asa Gilmore from Sutro Tunnel Restoration Project, and they are your presenters tonight. So welcome and thank you.
Thanks, guys. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. Everybody that comes here and helps support these things supports local nonprofits and the restoration of this project. So yeah, like as you say, my name is Chris Pattison. I'm the project manager and executive director of the Friends of Sutro Tunnel charity. We are a nonprofit organization that has been donated this 28-acre site so that we can help to restore it and bring it back to life. What we're going to talk about tonight is the history, a little bit of the history of the tunnel, but more of what the projects are that we're doing. And then Asa Gilmore here will talk about living at the site. Asa, want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I'm Asa Gilmore, and I've been involved with the Friends of Sutro Tunnel project since about 2016, volunteering out there, and I've been the on-site caretaker for the last 3 years.
Excellent. So, let's get started. What you see in this picture here is part of the site itself. Asa took this photo. He's a fantastic photographer. This is our machine shop that you see with the Sutro Tunnel in the background. Now, this is a picture of Adolf Sutro when he first came out to the site. Young, happy, excited. He started out in Prussia and then came over to the United States, went down through the Isthmus of Panama before you could cross the United States. There's no trains at that time, and then went back up north to San Francisco, and that's where he got his start. He was a cigar salesman, sold linen, sold towels, did that sort of thing, but then heard about the silver out here. In 1859, you guys know that's when they first started finding silver in this area, and they tried to keep it real quiet, didn't tell anybody, so naturally everybody heard about it, everybody knew, and Adolf was one of those everybodies. He came out on April 8th, 1860, and he wrote this short book that is available on our website and our blog, Trip to Washoe. He talks about crossing Lake Bigler. Anybody know what Lake Bigler is? Yeah, that's right, Lake Tahoe. So he calls it Bigler in his book. He talks about going through Apple Hill, coming down, his time in Genoa, Carson City, his time in Dayton, Virginia City, and his findings and his exploration of this area. It's an incredible book that we just found a few months ago and published on our blog. If you're into our local history, definitely read this short story. So when he came to this area, he wanted to figure out, like everybody else, how do I make money? If you look at this map on my side here, you'll see a map of the area. Dayton's in there, and there's a little marking in the town of Dayton, and you can see this building. And right over behind those houses there, it says Sutro. That was his first stamp mill. That's where he first started making his money. And Asa took this video. Asa, this was at?
The Gold Stamp Mill and right by the fairgrounds in Virginia City.
Can everybody hear that okay? Good. This is an actual operating stamp mill. How do you get to that?
It's right by the fairgrounds. If you know where the the caretaker there will show you around. I think that in the summer they have tours every Saturday, and it's definitely money well spent. I mean, you don't get to see an actual working stamp mill very often. When you do, like I've seen stamps fire out before, you know, there's some museums that have working stamps, but actually seeing an entire mill and the entire process going through, the dust coming up off the bed is really pretty incredible.
Yeah, so if you get a chance, it's a hidden gem in Virginia City that not everybody knows about. So one of the big problems facing Virginia City mines, as everybody know, was water, right? They would strike the clay, it would fill the mines, and burst through them. And in that water, it was so hot, it was steaming, and it would kill people. This was tremendously dangerous. You guys can learn more about it from the people who know more about that up in Virginia City. But that was hot, boiling water, and it would kill miners. It was a terrible thing. So what do we do? How do we resolve this? Well, you build a drainage at it. On this map here, you'll see this is actually from Adolf Sutro's lecture on mines and mining. You can hear his entire lecture on our website. On here, you can see where he talks about the Harz mine. In Germany, in Prussia at the time, what they would do is drill drainage adits. And this was kind of a newer idea for mines in Virginia City. But he had a lot of pushback on that from the Bank of California, from William Ralston, William Sharon. And then there was a fire at the Yellow Jacket. Thanks, guys. Lost it for a sec. At the Yellow Jacket mine. I think it was 47 miners lost their lives in that fire. They capped it off, and there was nothing could be done about it. So this gave him the opportunity to promote building the tunnel that everybody fought against him on, so that miners could have another safe way to escape the mines of Virginia City would be through this drainage adit. So the drainage adit would be built not only to drain the water of the mines of Virginia City, but to be ingress and egress for the miners, and to be ventilation. At that time, they were getting pneumoconiosis, which is silica in the lungs. This is before they invented the drill bits with the hole through the center of them, and had water in that to keep down the silica. And this would help to ventilate that, and it would also, so they could transport ore through it. He gave a speech, like I said, you can hear on our website. It's an hour and 42 minutes long. I've listened to it 5 times now. It's incredible. It's not just a dry lecture like what I'm giving. It's awesome. Adolf gets into it, and he talks about politics. He talks about the evil bastards in California and the Bank of California, William Ralston, William Sharon, Mackey Fairflood, and O'Brien. He says even in there, I'm not going to be a Republican anymore. I'm not a Democrat. I'm going to run as an independent. Well, he ended up running in Nevada, and he lost to William Sharon. And then he went to San Francisco, as you guys know. We'll get into that. So, the solution was this tunnel. This is where it starts. That's Sutro, that blue dot. I don't know how well you guys can see that. That's the side of Sutro. It runs 3.88 miles back to the Savage Mine, and then it goes 1.5 miles north and south in either direction, connecting the majority of the mines of Virginia City. So then he leaves to San Francisco. A lot of people speculated early on that he left because he sold most of his stocks and made a ton of money and screwed Nevada and got out. Well, not really. What had happened was he got caught with another girl when the president came to visit.
Whoops.
Yeah. And that was kind of the instigator behind it. His wife left the area and never came back. So he went to San Francisco, sold a lot of his shares, but he gave the business over to his brother Theodore Sutro. Theodore took care of the company and actually made it more profitable. They invested another $250,000 into it and were profiting about $250,000 after that. And then Theodore Sutro, so he wrote this book, the 1887 Report to Stockholders. In this, you can see the numbers. It's also on our website. It shows how he steadily increased profits out of the tunnel after Adolf Sutro had left. He also did this as a bid to sell it. He ended up selling it to Franklin Leonard Sr. Franklin Leonard Sr. went on to consolidate most of the mines of the area. It was the Leonard family really that owned most of everything. You guys, if you've been here a long time, you've probably heard the name Pete Leonard. Pete owned it, and his is the White House on the corner when you head up to VC. Then in 1907, they came back in and put another $250,000 to reconstruct the tunnel. So everybody thinks mining in this area ended in 1890. It didn't. It continued. They just hired less people. They didn't need as many people because they already dug them. They're still processing the ores. They're working in the tunnel. They're pulling ore out of it and making a ton of money. And then the Leonards, they were working in there up through the 1940s. They got the stamp mill going again, and they were doing custom ore stampings. This is the West family. That's Albert West and Frances West, and I forget the sisters and the mom's name. They were the ones that were, or he was hired to take care of the site in the 1940s. And he was living in the mansion when it burnt in 1942. Yeah. When you go on one of our tours, you can go on the mansion foundation. Taylor was just there today, learned a whole bunch. There was speculation, I'll go over it real quick, you learn more on the tour, but early on there was speculation that it was a disgruntled employee that they fired, but that's really not what had happened. I talked to the kid he's in his 90s now, And he wrote his stories that are on our website you can read. He says, well, Dad hooked up the Pelton wheel. Mom wanted electricity. We didn't have electricity. He hooked up the Pelton wheel, and he did it wrong, and it burnt the house down. So I go over this real quick before I get up to what we've been up to. But the main point I like to focus on is mining in this area didn't just vanish in 1890. It continued all the way up until 1942. Executive Order L-208 is what shut down all non-essential mining in the United States so that they could focus on the war effort. They need lead, they need iron, they don't need gold and silver at that time. And then that's what happened here. Virginia City, Dayton, we became a ghost town, really. After that, some other folks started showing up. You guys know the Tennants? That's Stoney and Laura Tennant, and that's Rocky Adamson in his white shirt. Rocky Adamson ran for sheriff, Lyon County. Didn't win, so he named himself Constable. He built a tent on wheels and would roll it around. And he did a record in the Sutro Saloon. You can listen to his music. We found the original recordings and digitized it and put it on YouTube. And he sings about the Dayton Inn, the Odeon. You got to listen to it. He sings about the Sutro Saloon and this area and tying a knot. He talks about tying a knot in the devil's tail, but he's awesome. These two guys here, the one on the right is Robin Larson. The one on the left is Pierce Powell. Pierce Powell's still around too. Robin Larson took over the site in the 1960s. And Robin hired Stoney to help take care of everything that was out there. Stoney worked his tail off. They didn't pay him very well. They paid him pretty much in venison steaks that he had to shoot the deer himself, cut the venison, cook it on their stove. Stoney's awesome. He'll tell you all about it. But Robin, he's the reason we lost the stamp mill at Sutro. He ran knob and tube wiring from the saloon out to the stamp mill to hang a light so he could get people's attention so they could come out and visit the saloon. Unfortunately, knob and tube wiring doesn't do that great in weather or at all. Burnt the place to the ground. Then started transitioning. Those folks started leaving the area. Then this guy moved out, Greg Melton. I don't know if you recognize this statue, but this is Lady Liberty that's on the Virginia City Courthouse. That's the exact same one. That's the Sutro Tunnel site. You can see the site behind him. That's where Greg, I don't think Greg built it, but he repaired Lady Liberty. He did build the Sutro statue that's in downtown Carson City, and that's a picture of Pierce Powell in front of it. That thing's 20 feet tall. There's also only 3 miniatures of that statue. One is in our ownership at our museum that you can see. One's at the Mackey Museum, and one's at the 4th Ward School. So please go see it at the 4th Ward also. And then, so this is a transition that I like to show what the portal looked like up until the point we got to it. Top left, that's the 1940s. You see how the portal facade is painted? More of a kind of slanted cursive. Well, that was the West family. Albert painted that. It did originally say 1888 in the top, and it was block lettering. 2001, it was repainted to original. But then after he had left in the 1950s, it's doing okay. 60s, starting to fade. 70s, really starting to fade. Nobody's taking care of it anymore. Then 1979, this company comes into the area, Houston Oil and Minerals. Greg Hess, who's a local guy, he worked for them as well. And they started opening up a lot of the old mines in this area under speculation of finding more gold and silver. Because what was happening in 79 and 80, it was skyrocketing. It was insanely high. But by the time they got to any of it, you guys know what happened? It plummeted to nothing. They lost their asses. And they walked away from it. They got back 2,500 feet into the tunnel, hit a clay wall with a lot of hydrostatic pressure. That means water. So Ralph and I were just talking. There is a lot of water retained, but it slowly is working its way through that. You have hundreds of feet of clay. There's no possibility of that just poking a hole and coming gushing out and collapsing VC. It's not how it works. It'll be fine. Trust us. But the water still comes out. Yeah. The water's still pouring out at about 30 gallons per minute right now. They did build a dam, and that's one of my ideas. I'll tell you about that in a sec, at 1,500 feet. The 1990s, getting even worse. Early 2000s, terrible. But then, some of the private investors that took hold of it had Joe Curtis come out and redo the portal facade back to original. That date, 1888 above the top, that was done by Theodore Sutro. He put that on there because that's the day he built this. Before that, it was a Greek-style facade. And then September 21, they hired me. These guys, Asa and the volunteers, they've been working their butts off out there. I'm looking around like, what do I do? Well, how about we open up that tunnel? And they said, no. His buddy's sitting on a tractor going, you're stupid. That's not going to happen. Drink a beer, hang out. Okay. Well, I don't know about that. Well, why don't we do something I heard about? This is a underground drone. We tried flying in a real drone. It hit the wall. It didn't work. This is a special Helios 3 that does LiDAR and 3D rendering and also tests the air quality.
Fellow citizens, ladies and gentlemen, before entering upon the subject of my lecture on mines and mining, I hope you will pardon me if I should take up a portion of your time for the purpose of saying a few words in regard to the history of the Sutro Tunnel. This great work and my connections therewith have been so long and so outrageously misrepresented by parties whose sole aim and object appears to be to get control of it for themselves, that I deem it my duty to set myself right before my fellow citizens. I first conceived the idea of running a deep tunnel to the Comstock lode shortly after its discovery, at my first visit to this section in the spring of 1860. The undertaking, however, was of so gigantic a nature and received so little encouragement that I did not take any active steps in the matter until the fall of 1864, when I concluded to apply to the Nevada legislature, which was to meet in the January following for a franchise to construct such a tunnel.
Pretty cool, huh? That is my favorite thing, was that video. Not just because it looked so cool, but what it showed us was after that initial collapse, the tunnel's wide open. All of those timbers Houston Oil and Minerals put in that was incorrect in the alluvial fill, we could pull out. All that dark area you see is water. And it tested the air quality. It wasn't until it got back about 500 feet did it get a little bit of methane kicked up under the fan blades, but that was just low, not even enough to harm a person. Pigeons are back there. So it's safe air, safe water, open area. And this is the actual video. Now see here, this is the collapse we were talking about. This was what, Asa, 5-10 feet in?
Yeah, maybe 15, 20.
And
to the timbers there.
To the timbers, and that was all caved in. What Houston Oil and Minerals did is they pulled out the original timbering and put in this false square set timbering. It's not true style. And this is what we were having to deal with. I have his voice playing again in this one.
To the Comstock lode shortly after its discovery. At my first visit to this section,
this is why you would think you can't get anywhere past it.
The undertaking, however, was of so gigantic a nature and received so little encouragement that I did not take any active steps in the matter until the fall of 1864, when I concluded to apply to the Nevada legislature, which was to meet in the January following for a franchise to construct such a tunnel.
And that's what we did afterwards. We saw that it was collapsed and we could pull it out. And I really like this picture too because it kind of looks like a black lab. You see his nose? Squirrel. But you see, one issue that we started running into early on, and Ace is the caretaker, he was cleaning out all the muck, but light was hitting this area, and there's this growth going on. All this algae started growing, it was plugging up all the works. And then we took that information, and we found some of the original drawings from Adolf Sutro himself. The original engineering. We took all the information we found from the drone footage, compared it to the historical footage, and re-engineered the entirety of the tunnel. And this is what we came up with. Adolf Sutro himself, I'll show you some of those photos. He didn't do square set in there. He did a dome structure because it's a loose rock alluvial fill. The dome, as you get pressure on the top, it's going to hit out the bottom, but there's nowhere for it to go. So it's going to stay in a dome shape. The first 50 feet, because that's an open area, we covered that with 90 yards of concrete. Oh, that's a tunnel again.
Years had elapsed.
And then enter our volunteers. Asa will tell you more about these guys. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be where we're at today. I'll let him go through some of that, but I want to show you, this is really new stuff now. And I'll show you the, if I can, my mouse will work, there we go. This is a tunnel now. Maybe not. Let's close that. Okay. There. Isn't that incredible? That's looking out. Oh, wrong thing. And this is one of the original photos from after we had pulled the timbers out. We're standing in the very center, our engineers. When you come on the tour, you can see the base of the original theodolite. It was all done by eye and magnetism. Not using any of the new technology today because they didn't exist yet. And the tunnel is still perfectly straight at only 1 inch per 100 feet grade. And we could still use the original theodolite to figure out where to put everything. It's still perfectly level and where it was supposed to be. This is what we call the turtle. This is a steel structure. It's rated to withstand 20,000 pounds per linear foot, bilinear foot of impact. A boulder can fall on top of this, and anybody that's underneath of it is going to be fine. We build a tunnel 5 feet at a time, slide the turtle back, haul debris 5 feet. We're at a hold right now. That project cost over $170,000. That was all donated money. And now I'm working on getting more donations. You know, think about it. Here's the guys working inside the first section of it. Yep. And that's where we're at now. If you want to go on a tour, go on our website, sutrotunnel.org. You can book a tour to the site. The tour usually takes 2.5 to 3 hours. And there's a lot more involved in that. You learn a ton of the history. You visit the Victorian, wood shop, machine shop, warehouse. The machine shop is being transitioned into our museum. You go inside the tunnel. I just got insurance today. Once we pay the bill, then you can go in the tunnel. Working on that. And the pond is now at 5 million gallons capacity. It was at 200,000. But we've got a main pond, a secondary pond, a standpipe, and we have reservoirs below us. Yeah.
At what level did the Sutro tunnel come in contact with the mines that needed the water to come out?
Yeah, so the tunnel is at 1,628 feet below the Savage Mine. That's the fairgrounds in Virginia City. And that's where he made it at 20,284 feet back, 4 miles approximately, and then connected from there. After that, that's when he was charging all the mines of Virginia City to drain the water and transport oil.
And then were there other tunnels to allow the miners to get out if this was considered an escape?
The only ingress and egress they had was at the mouths of the mines and then the tunnel itself. That was it. There's no other, I mean, there might be some others. I've heard speculation and theories, but nothing for fact. But I'd like to turn it over now to Asa, who's going to show you actually the really cool stuff about living out there and some other stories that he's going to tell you. Would you like the mic, Asa?
No, that's all right. I think that,
Let's get this set up. Any other questions while Asa's getting set up about the tunnel and what we're doing in there?
I have a question for you. So how far have you
Just set up.
excavated into the mine itself?
So it's not a mine. It's a drainage alley. It's a tunnel. Yeah.
How far have you guys gotten?
We are now at 50 feet back. But once you go on one of the tours, you'll see that the collapse isn't that bad behind it. It's just a matter of scraping and cleaning and pulling and working, section by section, getting back there. But you can buy a timber set for $5,000 to get your name on it, or only $250 per lagging, and you get your name on there, and that helps support.
Will you guys eventually open that all the way up into Virginia City?
It is likely that we won't be able to, depending on how, if we can't mitigate the water pressure that's behind, I don't know how many hundreds of feet of clay, then no. But if we can, then yes. It all depends on funding. With enough money, you can do anything. But just today I met with the executives of Microsoft. We're trying to go for the big dollars. We'll see. But those guys, all the funding we've got so far, all the hundreds of thousands of dollars we spent, came from folks like you, from us, from our volunteer work, from volunteers coming out, donating their time, and just regular local business owners and people donating money. So, several of which are in this room now. A lot of volunteers and donors in here right now, so thank you guys. But yeah, we'll do more questions. Let's hand it over to Asa. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris. All right, guys. So one of the questions I get asked most often is, what's it like living at the Sutro Tunnel, and more importantly, how did you get this gig as the caretaker? And so I'm going to try and give you a little bit of a personal view into not only the progress of the volunteer efforts over time, but also just into a little bit of what my job is like out there. I think that a lot of people have different ideas of what it's like to live in a ghost town in a place like that, and some are a little overly romanticized, and some are dead on. So we'll go through this, but my background is in commercial photography. I ran a photography business, still run a photography business, and that's where my livelihood comes from. This photo, you can't see it too well on the projector, but this was taken long night exposure, and this was the day before, the dawn before the recent tunnel construction started. So kind of a little bit of a moment in time there, and we'll be updating that soon, obviously. This is from the first day that I came out to the site. So I've volunteered with historical organizations for pretty much my entire life. My teenage years, I was volunteering at the museum in Markleyville. Before the Sutro project, I spent a lot of time volunteering at the Donovan Mill, and then followed our volunteer coordinator, Pam Abercrombie, over to the Sutro site when she started working here. There's my buddies up on the roof fixing the wood shop. That building, I am pretty sure, would not be standing if they didn't get up there that year. It was really starting to be ready to fall down. These places only last so long without a roof on them, as you know. Anyone who's been out to the site recently knows it doesn't look like this now. There's not down trees all over the place. It's a lot cleaner, tidied up. You can walk around. So those are a little bit of a picture of where we came. Now, one of the misconceptions perhaps about the role of caretaker is that I don't know, you look at the guy in Cerro Gordo, and a lot of folks think that, I must just be up there hanging out in old buildings making YouTube videos, and the reality of it is that if you're working on a project like this, your job is, getting dirty, basically. So that's our volunteer coordinator, Pam, and she is all set up to go into the carriage house and literally shovel out all the years and years of pigeon and squirrel droppings and all of that. So basically, to be a caretaker or a volunteer at the site, your job is to know how to handle your guano. And that applies in a lot of ways. Handling the guano might literally mean shoveling the guano. It might mean digging out the frozen water pipe from a couple of months ago and stopping that leak before it got too bad. All of the volunteers come into contact with it at some point, and I have some photos that show how bad it was, but I didn't put them in the slideshow. I wasn't really sure if you guys had eaten yet or not. So in documenting the site, I've tried to photograph it tastefully, right? But our dear volunteer Jim there, you can see that those little piles that are behind him underneath those boards that we're prying up that were layered on top of the warehouse second story. Yep, guano. But we do have a wonderful volunteer team. Jim just recently moved to Southern Nevada, but he spent many years up here volunteering with us and was kind of one of our one of our main people, contractor skills behind the various stages of the restoration. That's Dan and Lee. This picture is interesting, and I'll refer back to this. This is inside the warehouse, and you'll see back here against the wall, you see that outline of the stairs? So that's another part of the caretaker role, and you know, some people think that it's just like Indiana Jones out there, right? And it is sometimes, but this is a little bit of actual detective work. It took us a long time to figure out where the stairs in that warehouse went. So that outline on the stair or on the wall would lead us to think that the stairs were there, but there's no sign of any landing or anywhere they could have gone. So unless they were going for, you know, Winchester Mystery House mode, we weren't really sure what was going on there. They went to an almost unsupported landing just to the right of that, and we found a photo from the 1800s that we used to determine their current location. So another of our volunteers, Steve Hibbs, he's a retired structural engineer, and another one of the people definitely responsible for making sure that things don't fall down. There's Chris holding the entire building up. Seriously, since Chris has come on board with the site, we've gone from this crew that was doing work like this on the buildings and really just, you know, trying to get them to a state where you could see what they were like in the 1800s and keep them from decaying more, to a site that's just progressing exponentially, and the whole vision of it has really come together and accelerated with his leadership. So it's been an exciting time to be part of it. This was one of my favorite volunteer days. So we actually got to lay the rail tracks in the original line with the tunnel. The ore carts that you see on the site now were scattered all over it. Like, you know, I think there was a couple in front of the warehouse. There was one in front of the wood shop. They were just, you know, all over through the sagebrush. And so we got to gather them together and actually lay the rail tracks and put them on the track with the tractor. That is Jim Coe right there, and my friend Bo and Tommy. Bo and Tommy will be out at the site this weekend for another volunteer day. And they're both Clamper brothers. Do we have any Clampers here in the audience tonight? So that's another part of how I got started volunteering with the site, is my Clamper chapter was part of the group that was helping out at the Donovan Mill, and my chapter made it a regular monthly event. So every month, even before I lived at the site, I was out at Sutro for at least one weekend working on it, sometimes more often than that. A little bit more of the track lane. So this would have been, I want to say 2018, 2019 that we were doing this. Another of my projects, and you can see that line on the wall again, the invisible staircase, right? Another of my projects is documenting the more recent history of the site, the folks that lived out there and spent time there over the years. And I'm gradually working my way through. I've done a long video interview with Stony Tennant. You can see that on our YouTube channel. I've got another one with Greg Melton that has yet to be edited. I've got one with Pierce Powell talking about his time as a bartender out here. And he goes over how they showed art house films from the Spark Cinema when that closed down. They brought all those films up to Sutro, and that picture, the top story right up there, they showed Japanese samurai films up there, and UNR art students came and watched them, believe it or not. So anyway, you can watch through those videos on our website. I was going to play segments of them, but we don't quite have the audio dialed in here tonight. But these are just a couple behind-the-scenes shots of that. That's Greg Melton in front of the tunnel. He's the one who did the Sutro sculpture in Carson that Kristen mentioned. That's Laura Tennant. Everybody who's active in the historical community here in Dayton should know Laura and Stony. Wonderful people. That's a picture from Stoney's presentation. That is Stony in the bottom, and he tells a hilarious story. It's a shorter clip on our YouTube channel. If you don't have time to watch the entire thing, go and at least watch the story where he talks about those pants. He was really excited to get those pants, saved up his salary for months and months to buy them, and they were 3 sizes too small. He walked around wearing them anyway. So one of the benefits to being the caretaker of the site, of course, is that I'm out there all the time, and I'm able to walk out my front door and get some great pictures. So I've scattered a few of these in. Gives a little bit of a perspective on what the site is like You know, the desert does have some really vibrant colors. That was last spring, I think. And trying to take the chance to appreciate those every time that I can. That's the tunnel. Well, that was before the collapse was filled out. So that was my view when I went in to clear out all the muck and algae, because the drain goes, right about where those reeds are coming up on the left there. That's where the drain goes into the pond, and that would fill up with algae, and I'd have to go in and clear it out and sometimes rake the algae out of the tunnel. We had a crossover pipe there that went to an irrigation ditch that ran by my house. None of that's in place anymore. The water all runs underground. But the algae problem was one of the caretaker's jobs. So again, you know, form of guano perhaps. I'm a proud parent, and my daughter lives out there with me, and I tried to keep the photos of my daughter in this somewhat brief, and I tried to group them together. So we'll get through this as quickly as possible. But she really is the best docent out there, in my ever so unbiased opinion. And she's got little collections and museum bits all scattered all over the site. This is the one that she made by the warehouse when we were living in a trailer there working on the house where I currently live. She's really excited about the history at Sutro, so much so, in fact, that when her school started a Chautauqua program, she decided to go as Rose Sutro, Adolph's daughter. Researched her entire life, dressed up as her, and went and gave the whole presentation at her school. So she's an active part of the site, and that is really cool thing about the whole Sutro experience, actually, is just, you know, being able to pass this history on to our future generations. And with my daughter, obviously, I'm doing that, but also we have schools come out, and school tours are always free at the site. If you want to set up a tour with any kind of a kid's school, then we can accommodate that. That's her in the machine shop. She's got a little side business that she does, drawing maps of the whole tunnel property, not to scale. Don't follow them around, you might fall in the pond. But but she will hand color them and sell them to you for $5 a piece. She's done quite well with it too. Probably made more money than I have. That's a sample of one of our school tours. That's one of our great docents, Pat. A lot of you know Pat from his work at St. Mary's and also at the Dayton Museum. And he gives most of our in-depth history of the tunnel and the Sutro years of the site. This picture is just to satisfy OSHA, because we do try and be safe out there. That's her working on her map business. She has to stay up at the highest point that she can find so that she can see all over the site, make sure that the pond's in the right spot. Another picture for OSHA, safety first, and, you know, junior caretaker, she knows how to handle her guano too. Building a birdhouse, the desert life has rubbed off on her, and she did another exhibit of coyotes for her school. And that's actually Chris's daughter on the right there, a little lemonade stand for a clamper event last year. That sculpture by Greg Melton. This isn't just a picture of my kid. I'm almost through those, I promise you guys. But that sculpture by Greg Melton in Carson City, we've got one of his smaller castings of that in our museum. And we were lucky to be there the day that got installed and kind of help with the building of the exhibit. That's one of the funnest parts of the job out there, is working on the whole presentation of the site and really getting familiar with the history of it. And it was cool to see that. Another part of it is, of course, working on the buildings. So we repainted my house this year. We've worked on the only kid who's excited about a pressure washer at the age of 8, right? So we've worked on a lot of the buildings out there, and she's helped me all through that. But the house painting project was one of the recent ones. Wildlife at Sutro. This is Fred. Fred lived by my front door for, the last couple of years. And I fully expect another version of Fred to come out this year. And Fred's probably a female, because Fred comes back every year, so there's eggs laying around somewhere. But cat spider, by what little I could find out about. Now, this is Chris's favorite picture.
Oh, yeah.
Like I tell it, Chris is a lot like Indiana Jones. He knows a lot about mysterious underground passages, and he hates snakes. So you can imagine the look on his face when I showed up. I had walked somebody up to the bathroom on the site, and come across the snake in the ground. I walk back to the tour group holding this thing around my arm, and I think that Chris nearly shot me that day. But when it's a rattlesnake, dispatch of it quickly, and my girlfriend likes to tell this as the story of the day she decided whether she could actually live with me or not. Because I didn't have time to actually skin the thing and make it into a hat band yet, so it lives in the freezer. And like I always say, one of these things is really dangerous. The other tastes great. Rattlesnake is delicious. A little more wildlife on the site. The insects out there can really be something depending on the year. This was a bright orange one, and can't quite see the color in there, but that's another fun part. Spiders galore. The funnel spiders, they show up every spring. I like the spiders. They keep the flies and everything down. Frogs, of course. That one actually lives in the tunnel, or lived in the tunnel. I think Bill from Simerson actually caught that and Did he? Okay, so he made it to the pond, I'm sure, because they went back and forth from the tube from the tunnel to the irrigation ditch all the time. Trapping rats, that's another part of my job, handling the guano, right? Now, most of these I get rid of fairly quickly, but the ones that are caught when my daughter's there, well, they're cute, they're fluffy. I mean, look at that thing. What am I going to do with that, right? And then she does things like this and draws illustrations of it, and that's 6-year-old spelling for cute, by the way, down there. But so what I do with these rats when I catch them is we've got a rat relocation program when the offspring is present, and we take them to Carson City to be a little closer to their friends in the government. All right, I've got a few snapshots in here that are just kind of random parts of the site that I really like and show things that I'm hoping to work on gradually. They aren't the best pictures or anything. This isn't a photo slideshow after all, it's a life slideshow, right? So this is a dynamite blast cabinet. Not a blast cabinet, a dynamite storage cabinet, but built to withstand a blast if one should happen. Those doors are really heavy. So this was laying just outside of the machine shop for a while, and the wind kept knocking it over, and that kind of thing drives me crazy. So we got some of our volunteers together in the old Jeep and loaded it back into the candle house where it belongs. There's actually 2 of those cabinets on site, and that's an eventual restoration project, is taking those down to bare metal and redoing the hinges on them and everything. They only stored the day's supply of dynamite in those. There's another foundation up on the hillside where they stored the main supply of dynamite far enough away from the site that it wouldn't take out the entire thing if it went off, because dynamite now, dynamite then, it's an unstable thing. And to answer your next question, yes, I already checked the cabinets. There is no dynamite in there, and yes, I would tell you that if there was. That's my buddy Jeff helping me with a smaller site project, but one that was pretty important at the time. This is one of our outbuildings. Not historic at all, but I'm rather fond of it because it houses the well, and I do like running water. I might have rattlesnakes in my freezer, but a few simple luxuries, right? Anyway, that was a project was it last summer? No, a couple of summers ago. Last summer, oh yeah, that's right. I started working on it the summer before, and it took a while to get the material in. But that's one of the things that we do outside of volunteer days, is there's always a project going on the site, and that was my job for, I think it took me a month or so to finish that up with the help of a couple of friends. And keep in mind, of course, this is a part-time thing for me along with my full-time job, so that's nights and weekends working on it. Didn't want you to think I was slacking off. Another picture inside the warehouse. There's that stair outline on the door again. This is working on the structure of the overhang there. In the 1960s, they got really excited about having the bar in there, having the apartments that they built in there, and they didn't build with a whole lot of foresight. So that entire floor that he's pointing to in the picture was pretty much unsupported, and we've since put in the original beam as it was designed by the Sutro organization, and you can walk up there without it falling down. Another picture of the little one, that's in the wood shop. The shelving and everything in there we're still going through. That building has actually gone through a whole ton of work. So I started out with pictures of that building on the site, and we've done a lot on it in the last year, and I'll get to those photos in just a minute. We rebuilt the entire south wall of it, and it's really a fun project. A few more landscapes. That's the cold one, but the fog rolls in the valley, and the Sutro site sits on this little, plateau looking over the whole thing. I always like it when I can see all the way to the mountains on the opposite side, but the valley's covered in fog. This one's kind of fun. Weren't you saying that they had mentioned a rainbow in the Sutro bio, Chris?
Yeah, in Adolf Sutro, when he had commencement day, October 19th, 1869, he invited 5,000 people plus to come out to the site. He had beeves roasting. Beeves are cattle. You take a cow, you bury it in the ground, and roast it like a pig. So he had beeves, he had pigs roasting, he had a huge banquet and a band, and a downpour happened. It was terrible. He still had instead of 4,000 people, he had like maybe 200 showed up, and it would rain for days after that. But in the Adolf Sutro biography that I highly recommend you read if you're interested in this subject and Dayton history and local history, it says, and the clouds opened up at his first pig strike, and a rainbow of perfect formation burst above the portal entrance where he started to dig. That I like to incorporate because this is a beautiful photo that Asa took of the rainbow bursting forth above the Sutro Tunnel portal. Kind of cool.
So in this picture too, you can note that the ore carts are all lined up right there. So this is after all of that restoration happened. I'm going to talk about that wagon over on the left in just a minute. So just a couple bits of visual reference for you there. This also shows the ore carts and the wagon. In this picture, you can see the electric mules on this side, and I've got some closer up photos of those. Fascinating thing with the evolution of the site. So in the 1800s, Sutro had actual mules, and he had hundreds of them. There's the mule barn still on the site. It's one of our original buildings, and the history of the mules there is a really fascinating portion of the tunnel story. In the early 1900s, when the mill was built on the site, they switched to electric mules. And so those two machines on the front are both electric locomotives. The one closest to the camera has Edison batteries on it. The other one seems to be missing the battery pack, and Elon Musk hasn't called us back about it yet. But we're working on restoration plans for that as well. Pogonip is beautiful out there. I think this was a couple of years ago, and it was just this fog inversion kind of thing, and it stayed around for days, which is unusual. Usually it burns off right away, but we were buried in fog for quite some time, and the site was just gorgeous. And this is one of the things I'm really looking forward to as the site opens up to more and more people. I mean, another of the caretaker's qualifications is that you have to be passionate about the place, but you also have to want to share your home, because we've had other caretakers that kind of went the one-armed bandit route and just like to chase people off. He literally did. He was an interesting neighbor for some time. I do like that everywhere I go in Dayton, I say I'm the Sutro caretaker, and everybody kind of takes a step back and assumes that I'm, terrifying and unhinged. They only do that because of that, right? Anyway, but it is. This is one of the things that I'm looking forward to with the site being open more and more, and one of the reasons that I put these landscape pictures in is because this place is beautiful, and it's beautiful in all these different times of year, and it's going to be great to share this with more people. And of course, I transitioned from that to another guano project, right? This isn't actually guano, this is just flooding. But I came home from work, this is a couple of years ago now. This was before you got the tractor, just barely, because I was dealing with this by hand for a while. But we get flash floods on the site, and the drainage isn't all that it could be, since, the plateau that the site sits on is built of tailings from the tunnel, and of course, that's just been spread out, and the center has kind of sunk over time, and so we don't necessarily have the puddles and drainage ditches where we want them, right? So enter the tractor, and Chris, I love what you've done at the site for many reasons, but I really love that tractor. It used to be, you know, I've had pickup trucks for years, and I used to think I couldn't envision life without a pickup truck, and now I really don't understand how people can get around without a tractor. I mean, I don't know how you get anything done. So, Chris got the tractor donated, and the whole world of the caretaker changed. This is, all right, so this area right here where my daughter's jumping around, that's the area that was covered in water in that last bit, and this is just working on the grading for that, raising it up a bit so that it would flow into the drainage ditch. As long as we're in that area, this is other stuff that I've done on the house where I live. This is the back porch, supported by totally up to code cinder block, sideways in the dirt. And, you know, I kind of wondered why the floor maybe, you know, gave a little bit when I walked on it and stuff like that. That wasn't even the big issue. The kitchen sink actually ran out at some point onto the floor just behind that wall. And so I ended up jacking up that entire side of the house, repouring some concrete foundations, putting in some footers. That's the floor behind it, and this is kind of halfway through, so it's a little bit better, but relaying the floor and all of that in there. All of these old places, you know, it's it's always, with the non-historic stuff, a dilemma of whether you just knock it down and start over or do what you can to fix it up. With the historic stuff, though, you learn how to fix it up and make it work because it's historically important. And even though this house isn't an original one to the site, it's been there for quite a while. It's going to continue to be there for quite a while, and I was lucky I was able to salvage it pretty well with some hours in the guano, you know. A little bit more on the house. This is where I live, so kind of overlooks the whole site. This is from the hillside and back, and that room with the cinder block is over here, so that's where I poured the concrete footings. I pretty much replaced that entire wall. The siding was just old and cracked. I took it apart and realized there was no insulation in it, so put insulation in the wall, and now I have a house with one insulated wall, so so I'm pretty happy about that. Seriously though, it's a wonderful place to live, and I've really enjoyed the work that I've put into it and just being part of it. So those windows right there, they were all broken out when I moved in, and it kind of made it into a sunroom, but was able to salvage the wood frames. That wall, I found the old Sutro "Do Not Enter" sign and used that for part of the siding. So, kind of a fun little salvage bit. Used the old material from the site because I couldn't have it looking too new, you know. And there's the tractor again, of course. Sutro on a beautiful winter day. I like the morning shots the best. You can see the sun just barely hitting the mountain peak up there. Honestly, that place at like 6 a.m. is just amazing. Another morning shot, you can see the electric mule in the foreground right here. And that was one of those really windy nights when the snow just got carved into some beautiful drifts. Nothing special about these photographically, but these are the electric mules. So Chris and I both have this idea that as the tunnel restoration progresses and we continue to lay this track back into where it was in the tunnel, that maybe we can restore one of these, or at least have a replica of one of them restored so that people can ride in an ore cart pulled by one of the electric mules into the tunnel, and we can do our tours that way. It's a long way off. I actually had some folks from the Carson Railroad Museum out to look at these, and they're pretty unique to the site. The, let's see, I guess I only put in the 2 pictures of this one. One off to this side was probably hand-built at the site, and that's the one with the Edison batteries in it. So there's no manufacturer on this one. This one in the foreground was probably from a kit, but there's also no manufacturer, no notable serial numbers or anything like that. So these are kind of unique items, and obviously the restoration of them is a long way off, but it's kind of a little pet project of ours for the future. The pond, like Chris mentioned, has really gone through a lot of work in the last couple of years. So this is a winter shot of it, but you can see all the rushes along that edge, and those had really grown into the pond, so it didn't have as much water capacity as it probably needed as we restored the tunnel. I'll get to more of that in a minute. That's Ione and Greg the day that he brought that sculpture in to be installed in the Machine Shop Museum. There's Chris and Mark Halpathan. Mark Halpathan's a Clamper brother and member of my chapters and a few others in Nevada, and they all came out for an event a couple of years ago. The wagon project. So, the tractor, that's a good caretaker tool, right? The other tool that's really important is the bottle jack. Use that to hold up that porch while I was working on the concrete, and also that wagon. Now, this is the start of, well, I don't know about the start, just an ongoing project of mine. Obviously, I live out there. I see all these things that we have sitting on the desert soil, and I wanted to get the wagon off the ground, so got out some concrete blocks and jacked it up. And just like I jacked up the underside of my house, this is another different beam that I had to replace under there. But holding up buildings, that's another caretaker job, and sometimes you run into guano under those houses too. There's Todd. He's another one of our volunteers, skilled contractor. He's working on the mule barn. We rebuilt the manger on the side of it this last summer, and that's the whole group. So those fresh wood panels along the side, that's what we put in, and those are all painted and have weathered the winter pretty well. A picture of the tunnel. This is after we cleared out the collapse. Caretaker hours, early, late, all the things. This is, I think I was up at about 3 a.m. for this one. This was getting ready for the Nevada Magazine Focus Photographers group to come out. We did a early morning dawn shoot out there. Really had a lot of fun, got some good images. Have I mentioned that the tractor is my favorite thing in the world? Some more pictures of the pond, great sunsets. Everybody says that, it must be great to live out there at the pond, and it really is. Like, you get out there on the canoe, and it's a wonderful thing. It's really serene and still. The water in the pond never freezes. It comes out of the tunnel somewhat warm still. I think that when Sutro initially opened the tunnel, it was 104 degrees. Is that right? It's not that warm anymore. So no hot springs. You can probably keep your bathing suits at home, but for now at least. But it is a beautiful feature, and we've expanded it a good bit. I got some pictures of that later on. So this is some more of the wood shop. That south wall was old and rotten. The Nevada sun hits it pretty hard, and so we took the entire thing off. There's Bo. There's the rest of the volunteers in there. Disassembled the entire side of the building and put it back together. Really satisfying volunteer work there. Back to the pond. And of course, if you have a tractor, you have to take care of it. And I have learned as a parent to delegate once in a while. All right, so the pond expansion that Chris mentioned, this is shortly after we did all of the major excavation on it. So this part of the pond was pretty much empty. It was used as an overflow. There's a crossover pipe that comes from the dam there and goes into the pond there. So when that pond would get too high, it would flow into this one, but it didn't really hold any water. It mainly just absorbed into the soil until we excavated it out a bit more and lined it with clay and bentonite. And that is the pond just a few days ago. I'm excited about tractors, obviously. That's one of the big pieces of equipment that came out to work on the removing the rushes from the pond and grading the whole expansion area. There's the kids. That's Chris's daughter and mine. That was the Mining Days event. So this was a really fun event that we did last year, and this is going to be an ongoing thing. The Mackie Muckers mining team, they have an exhibition every year it's mainly a fundraiser to take them to the nationals, or in this case I think it was the World Championship in Australia. So it's a natural fit for the site, and it was great to have them out there, and we hope to grow that again this year. It'll probably be we haven't set an official date for that yet, but these guys will be out again in September. And a couple more sunsets. Another job of the caretaker is to help open up the buildings and get film crews and all of that sort of thing in, and usually stay on this side of the camera. I try to put this guy in front of the camera as much as possible. I think this was a YouTube show, if I remember correctly. Which one was that? Did that come out yet? We've done so many of them. This is just a couple of weeks ago now, taking out the floors and finding remains of past residents. Did I mention I love my tractor? So more drainage work, right? This last year there's a whole lot of moisture to deal with, right? And use the tractor to improve the drainage into the old pond, and all of this is changing. We've got companies coming in to actually level the site and make it so that it drains off the hillside further. But another caretaker's job, mud. So back to clamper involvement. For those of you who aren't familiar with Eclampus Vitus, it's a fraternal organization, and it's basically a history group. Now, they've got a reputation as drinkers, of course. I like to say that we harness the power of a drunken mob to do good things and preserve history. This guy on the right here we call him the Noble Grand Humbug. He's the president of his chapter, but he's the president of the San Francisco chapter. That's Bo. He was the president of the Snowshoe Thompson chapter that year. So this plaque was on the Cliff House in San Francisco, which of course was another Sutro project. They were doing Cliff House renovations, didn't have a spot for it, made its way back to the chapter, and they donated it to us. So kind of funny how those things come full circle, and it brought some folks interested in the San Francisco side of Sutro history up to the site, and we got it in place just in time for our big clamper event last year. We had 200 guys up here from all over the western U.S. And of course, the clampers are a part of this building as well. We have a plaque right on the outside of the Odeon Hall talking about the Misfits history. That's another picture from the clamper event. I got to do the mule barn tour and the group at the tunnel. One of our members, Dave Otero, he's actually an excellent actor, and he dressed up as Sutro, memorized his entire speech, and gave it at the site that day. That was a pretty cool thing to witness. But we recreated a little bit of the classic photo of Sutro. I think that we have a copy of it in here somewhere. Yeah. So that picture of Sutro, actually, I think it was taken in London, if I remember correctly. So it was completely staged. So this might be the only picture of a Sutro with a pickaxe that was actually at the site. A little more sunsets. Now, this last sequence here, one of the things that I love about living out there, and there are many things that I love about living out there, but it's the variety of it, right? It's getting to share the history and progress of the place with everybody. It's getting to watch it grow, especially from, remember that first picture that I showed you with all the downed trees and everything. And you go from that to, this is the wooden structure that stands inside the tunnel right now that got lowered in over the top by crane. So that's it sitting outside on the site, and that's pouring the concrete over the top. These are just highlights of my last few months, just things that I found really personally exciting. Tractor, my girlfriend, and my pickup truck. I mean, I'm a happy man. We had a mini excavator on the site. I'm really starting to like these toys. I tell you what, we had to give the mini excavator back. That's why I was up at dawn taking pictures of it. But we've got another one out there now. We're working on adding power to the tunnel so you can actually see inside the thing on tours. So that's exciting too. I mentioned that being a caretaker, you have to handle the guano. Now, I really like that I have a tractor to handle the guano sometimes. I currently hold the Sutro land speed alpine record. And that's only on skis because these three have me beat on the sledding front. And like I said, really the greatest thing about this is sharing this place with future generations, sharing it with everybody. And obviously, I'm especially proud to share it with my family and the people that I love. But as it grows, it's really amazing to watch it open up, bring more and more people out there, and really see kind of what a pivotal spot Sutro is. I mean, this is a place where you stand on that plateau and you look out across the town that he was trying to build and see that tunnel that reaches 4 miles back into a hillside and intersects with the mine shaft at, just dead on perfectly. He just drilled straight back in a straight line. And you really realize how the landscape of Nevada might have changed completely if his vision had come to fruition just a few years earlier. I mean, that would have been a huge town, and all of the ore would have been coming out, and there would have been mills on the Carson River and all of that. And you can kind of see these divergent paths of history. And in embracing all of those possibilities, you can also see where this site is going and embrace the future that we're building with it, and expanding the tunnel and bringing it back to the kind of place where you can walk into it a few hundred feet. And who knows how far back we'll get with this. Obviously, there's the clay wall that Chris had mentioned. There's the bulkhead that Sutro constructed because he realized rightly that if he was charging people to take out ore and take out water, and he couldn't shut it off, then they could just stop paying their bills and still flush the toilet, So there's a bulkhead back there, and we don't know whether it's closed or open. I'm betting that it's closed. We don't know what condition it's in, whether it's leaking at all or not. We don't know how much water's built up behind that. There's 1.5 miles of north and south laterals, even if we were to make it all the way through to the Savage mine shaft. And then, of course, there's the ventilation shaft sites. There's 4 of those along the route. So there's tons of things to explore in there, but as we get further into the tunnel, there's also, pretty achievable mysteries to solve. We know that there were machine shops and storage rooms built off to the side. Who knows what's back in there, It's going to be interesting just to see how big it gets. I'm sure that it opens up at points. I'm sure it closes in at points. Photography really wasn't to the point where there's any photos of what the inside of the tunnel was like. We have to rely all on written reports, and given the working circumstances of the time, it was just like, well, it works. It gets the people through. Nobody talked about the tight spot at mile 3 or anything like that. So there's all sorts of exciting things to find out about this, and it's really cool that we can talk about the tunnel in addition to all of the buildings up there. And my restoration work and volunteer work was so focused on those buildings for so many years, and they're an important part of telling the story. But just to see how Chris has expanded on this and actually motivated the public to come and rally around this cause, it's an inspiring time to be part of this site. And I have, in my entire time at the tunnel site, been incredibly grateful just to be part of such an amazing group of people and to be part of the site. So Chris and I will take any questions that you guys have, and appreciate your time and interest in it tonight.
Well, let's first hear it for Asa. Thanks, Asa. Well done.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And first and foremost, we are a nonprofit group. So on those flyers that you have there, there's some packages. In that package, you can get a Sutro Tunnel silver medallion that is framed on actual Comstock silver, stamped at the Carson City Mint. There's a limited production of them. I think that's number 69. So all the rest have been given out. So we have 69 to 100 that are left at the $1,000 level. We have the Comstock Tunnel and Drainage Company original stock certificates available that are in part of the donor package. And we have t-shirts for only $20. But please feel free to take a look at any of our historical stuff here. And does anybody have any questions for Asa or I? Okay. Can I do a shout out? No, real quick, Patrick too. No, go. Or Peter. So you guys may see some photos of a little kid at the Sutro Tunnel site sitting on machinery. From what year was that, Peter?
58.
1958. There's a little kid. Yeah, I'll give you a check. And we also have with us tonight Taylor Hamby. Taylor's sitting there with the hat. She's our new assistant and fundraiser. And she also works at the 4th Ward School and is really motivated with local history. Knows way more than I do, for sure. I'm just a salesman. So any questions, guys? Comments? No? Fantastic. Well, please take a look through our merchandise. The donor boot is out. George? Anything from you guys? Are we good?
We're good.
Awesome.
I think Katie wanted to talk about their upcoming presentations. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Perfect. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you guys so much. That
Yeah.
was fantastic. Another round of applause. So I actually want to thank George for opening up the Odeon, allowing the lectures at the hall, and the Odeon Oldies, which are going to be, once a month? Twice a month? Once a month.
Once or twice or 3 times a month.
On Wednesday nights. Our next lecture is on April 19th, and that is the restoration of the Union Hotel, which you can see right down through that window there. And so Glenn Hasbrook will be doing that lecture, and I know he did we were looking through some stuff, and he did a lecture on it back before we even moved in there, so this was like, probably 2017, 2018, he did that other lecture, so you'll see some good pictures there. And then the really exciting thing is that McAvoy Lane is gonna be here on May 13th, and those tickets are going on sale when, Jill?
As soon as I can have the time to get them.
Get your plug home and do that now, okay? Yeah, so McAvoy Lane will be here, and what's really cool about that, when he found out that, George contacted him and said, can you come and do it? And he was thrilled because Mark Twain was here.
And he said this is one of the verified places, so it gives him, he said it gives him chicken skin knowing this is good.
So we hope to see you guys here for the Odeon Oldies, and not only with McAvoy doing that Chautauqua, there's some other Chautauquas that are planned out as well with Debbie Lynn, and I think they're trying to get Kim Harris here as well. So you wanted to drive up to Carson or to Virginia City to see all that fun stuff. All right, well, thank you.
I just wanted to say a big thanks to also, in addition to you guys, thank you so much, but Katie and Glenn, that window you looked through to see the union, they donated that. And the lighting downstairs, new chandeliers down there, they donated all their time and effort into creating that. So I couldn't have done this honestly without any of you guys here and a few of you back here. So I love you guys here in Dayton. Thanks for all the help, and I appreciate you.
Thanks, George. Thank you, guys. Get a cocktail. Have a beer.